at import and exports and legal implications. And this is a really important aspect of any business. I keep on emphasizing to people, ignorance of the law is no excuse. If you don't want to incur expenses, waste time, or damage reputation to business, it's always important to pay attention to the law. The fact you haven't read it is immaterial. There will be consequences. So I'll just share my material as we proceed. My PowerPoint slide. I'm sure everyone can see that.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. And I just commence with that so that it's on the full screen. Okay. And I guess everyone can see that also on the full screen.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So technically, we're basically looking at international trade laws and compliance with all these aspects in terms of contracts and statutes. So it's really important to get familiar with this. It's not just I have someone. The advice we give even parties is you get familiar with it. When it goes beyond what you can handle, then it is important you retain a legal professional who specializes in this area so that you can know what to do with respect to regulations, contracts, or any legal pitfalls, or if by chance you have a dispute, how do you resolve it? Personal knowledge is important, like in accounting, finance, you want to have your own personal knowledge, but when you get to where it goes beyond your ability, you want to be able to seek legal assistance. Why are we looking at this? When you are within a country, you have domestic laws, but when you are dealing across countries, import and export, you definitely would have laws that differ from what you're already familiar with. So there must be a definite interest in looking at these areas. Also, we have cultural barriers, language barriers, geographical impediments that might make some of these things not the way we are familiar with. Okay, all right, let's look at the next slide. We need to understand application, the applicable law, as I would call it, the law that applies. One of the things that I do know that if you do not take particular attention of this or get familiar with this, last minute people go on the internet and listen, on the internet you have information overload. If you do not know what you're doing, you might just find yourself going to the wrong area or wrong country and taking their laws and applying it in the wrong place. So it's good to understand the applicable law so that you avoid any unpleasant legal consequences. As I said again, it's one of the catchwords I'll probably be using in this presentation. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Okay, if the police stops you, you're not going to tell the police officer that I have not read the highway code. When I read it, you can now charge me or fine me. So it's important that we pay attention. I want us to look at a 3 minutes video, which just summarizes a lot of stuff that we are going to talk about, understanding import and export compliance laws in international trade. So I'll just quickly go to that. I hope I'm able to. All right, it's on YouTube. Just let me know if that is not seen. Can we see that?
We can see it. We can see it.
Okay, I hope the sound is also available.
And welcome to our video on import and export compliance requirements, which is a crucial aspect of international trade laws and regulations. As businesses expand globally, it becomes increasingly important to ensure that all import and export activities comply with the relevant regulations and laws. Failure to comply can lead to severe consequences, including legal penalties, fines, and loss of business reputation. Therefore, it is essential to have a clear understanding of import and export compliance requirements. The first step in understanding import and export compliance requirements is to identify the relevant laws and regulations that apply to your business. These can include international, national, and local laws such as customs regulations, import, export licensing requirements, trade sanctions, and export control laws. The next step is to ensure that all documentation and paperwork are completed accurately and submitted on time. This includes export declarations, import licenses, bills of lading, and commercial invoices, among others. Any errors or omissions can lead to delays, fines, or even seizure of the goods. It is also essential to screen all parties involved in the transaction, including customers, suppliers, and intermediaries, to ensure that they are not on any restricted or denied party lists. These lists include individuals or entities that are sanctioned by the government due to their involvement in illegal activities, such as terrorism or drug trafficking. Furthermore, businesses must ensure that they are not exporting goods or technology that are restricted or prohibited under export control laws. These include military items, dual-use items, and items that may have strategic significance, such as encryption technology. Another critical aspect of import and export compliance requirements is maintaining accurate records and implementing robust internal controls. This includes keeping detailed records of all import and export transactions, conducting and laws is a critical aspect of international trade. Thank you for
Okay.
No, in terms of rules, export restrictions, statutes that have been passed, contracts that have to be obeyed, government regulations that need to be followed. We're also talking about being compliant with laws on money laundering, terrorist financing. All those things are things that you want to ensure that you have paid full attention to this aspect. I do know that there was a time that someone shipped some goods from Nigeria, and unfortunately, they did not pay attention to some of these laws. And the goods got to this to Canada, and eventually the requirement was for them to ship it back. You know what kind of cost implications that would be. So I want us to quickly go back to the PowerPoint slide. All right, as I said, get familiar with the applicable laws. So first of all, before we go ahead, I just want to let us know that there are several parties that we usually deal with, especially in the area of law. There are 4 groups of parties in import and export business, and there are legal implications to where they stand. The question is, which of the parties are you? When we look at the next slide, we'll be able to understand what I'm talking about. The first group of people are people that are unaware of the law. They basically are not familiar with what should be applicable or what laws they should comply. Someone has decided to go into the export-import business, but they are not aware of the law. In such instances, such parties need a good insight, because if they are not made aware of the law, there is trouble ahead. There are legal consequences. There are legal implications ahead. There are also parties, the second category are parties that they are aware of the law, but they choose to ignore the law. They choose to ignore the law. It doesn't really matter. We have ways of sorting out this matter. These parties, the best advice I can give them is to let them know there are consequences. And when these consequences occur, it's going to be it's going to be costly, it's going to be time consuming, and it is also going to damage possible business reputation or individual reputation. So such parties, the best advice would be to let them know their consequences to ignoring the law. Then the third category of parties are parties that desire to be compliant. They are going into the import and export business or international trade, they are desirous to be compliant. They want to have a good insight. They don't just want to do things anyhow. So what we would basically advise such parties are basically to address any concerns they have so that they are fully compliant and they don't have any issues that would distract them today or tomorrow from their business. Then the last category of people, there are parties that basically believe they are compliant. Yes, this is a good thing, but sometimes people believe they are compliant and they possibly might not be compliant. So in this category of people, to avoid any legal implications, it's always good to have a second opinion with compliant in. So all these are parties that could be in the environment of import and export. Whatever parties, whatever position a person stands, there are consequences or legal implications, and it's always good to ensure that we are not taking the law as it does not matter. Okay, so look at areas to be able to deal with these legal implications. There are 4 things we need to do when we are going into any business, especially going into international trade or import and export. You want to understand like finances, there are financial, legal, financial risk, there are insurance risk. In the legal environment, there are legal risk also. And it is absolutely important to ensure that you are aware of this legal risk. If you're not aware of these things, you are not going to do anything about it. Okay? So what we have in such a situation is to have what is known as a legal risk management plan. So that from get-go, before the business commences or during the business, there is already a legal risk management plan that has been drawn up. What's the legal risk management plan all about? First of all, you want to identify what are the legal risks in import and export business. What are the legal risks? If you don't identify it, then it's difficult to do anything about something. Okay, I'll give a simple example. If you have a restaurant, if you don't identify the legal risk, what are the legal risks? Okay, someone could slip and fall. There could be bad food. Waiter could assault a customer. If you don't identify these things, then you probably will not be able to plan for it. Okay, so the same thing applies with import and export. We must identify legal risk. What are the things that could occur? Are we compliant? Are we meeting international standards? Are we dealing with laws with respect to corruption? Are we dealing with laws with respect to documentation? Okay, once we identify this, then we are able to evaluate it, because the evaluation comes to be able to determine how you respond to it. And the evaluation is basically a process of trying to know how regular does this occur and what are the consequences. Okay, how regular does it occur? Does it occur every time? And what are the consequences? If it occurs regularly, you want to pay attention to it. If the consequences are high, you want to also pay attention to it so that you'll be able to devise the appropriate strategy to the legal risk. So that is the third item you have to know. Once you determine the evaluation, you have to know how do you manage the legal risk? What are the strategies you want to adopt? And we'll look at that at the next slide. But the last aspect is also important because nothing is cast in stone. You know, we could see that from the COVID. When the COVID was raging, there had to be a review and revising. There were health risks, but also at the same time, there were legal risks that were occurring, and everybody had to, businesses, individuals, government, had to consistently review and revise. And that's the same thing with the import and export. The legal implications could be severe if you are not reviewing and revising. There could be new laws. There could be change of forms. There could be change of procedure. You want to ensure that you are fully updated. Let's look at the next slide and see what are the strategies that you can, or we can, let me use that word, we can adopt to manage or strategize in the process of managing legal risk. The first one is avoidance. Okay, when you look at certain businesses, you know, the legal risks are high, you want to avoid the business. If you are shipping military equipment and you know the legal risks are high, you don't want to import and export military equipment. If you're shipping nuclear equipment or nuclear items or toxic items or explosive items, if you cannot handle the legal risk, then the best thing is to avoid it. Okay, it's the same thing when you look at perishable items. Sometimes that is the reason why people avoid perishable items, especially when you are shipping items from certain countries where your items might be in the port for so long. And the legal risk, you have those all those items rotten, then you end up supplying items that are not what you had agreed with the buyer. Okay, so the first strategy is when the legal risk is high or becomes too high, the bottom line is to avoid it. The second is if the legal risk could be high, the best way is to transfer the legal risk. How do you transfer the legal risk? Most times you either do it by contract, you get a waiver from the other party and say, well, they would be responsible for the risk. Okay, sometimes you ensure that you communicate that you are not responsible or you exclude yourself by contract from certain responsibility. I'm sure a lot of us have seen the signboards at the parking lot. You are parking at your own risk. Okay, so that is transferring the risk to you. You can park there, but if anything happens, that is your problem. So that also could happen. You transfer, you make sure you have proper documentation to ensure that it is transferred. Another way of transferring legal risk is we ensure that we get the proper insurance. Okay, so that is sitting down and discussing with the insurance company so that you know what kind of insurance covers import and export, so that if perchance anything happens that you do not want to be held responsible individually for, because these things could be costly, you want to have an insurance policy that kicks off to protect in case of anything happening. Okay, then also we could reduce, we could manage legal risk by reduction, having the right policies in place for your organization, the procedures, the right training, so that everybody knows what to do. Okay, when you're in import and export, you want to ensure that everybody is fully conversant with the laws so that nobody decides to cut corners. The last way is if the legal risk is minimal, people just go ahead. Every business has its legal risk. Same thing, financial risk, insurance risk. So if it's minimal, people go ahead and just retain the risk because they definitely know that the profit is worthwhile in terms of the risk. Okay, so all these things decisions are based on evaluation. What are the consequences? Are they quite high? And usually when the consequences are high, most times we do note that the profit from those businesses would probably, the higher the risk, the more made from such businesses. So that's an in-house decision that people will have to take the get-go to ensure that they are not just jumping into a business, especially in a very delicate sector as import and export, where you are dealing with different laws of the local country and the laws of the global countries. All right, let's look at some of the legal risks, and I'll just be brief about this so that we can quickly go into other items and have opportunity to ask questions. In contracts, there will be legal risk in contracts. What happens if we breach this provision? Okay, there are consequences when you are dealing with international parties. There are consequences, and if you breach a provision, there are consequences that could occur. It could be the contract is canceled or there are penalties to be paid. There's also the litigation. If perchance there's a legal action, what are the chances what chances do we have in this matter? Are we going to win this matter or lose this case? What kind of damages will come out of it? You want to be able to ensure that at least you observe that as one of the legal risks that could occur. Whenever you have two people or more people gathered or businesses come together, there's a likelihood there will be conflicts. Okay? There will be conflicts. So how do you manage this legal risk if there's litigation, or how to avoid the litigation? Same thing in any business, government regulations are very important. If not, people will just do whatever they want to do. So what we have is another legal risk in the area of regulations. What regulations apply to this organization that we're operating, or this business we're operating, and what is the cost of non-compliance? Okay, this is important because there are some regulations that could shut down a big business and could blacklist the business because of certain things occurred. Okay, so paying attention to government regulations is absolutely important. Then another area of legal risk that we need to watch out for is when there's a change of law. Okay, sometimes people enter into something without being familiar that the laws have been changed. What was legal before is no longer legal. What was a particular standard before is no longer. So you want to ensure that you are not entering into a business or import and export business on the basis of former knowledge. Okay, you want to have updated knowledge as to what is applicable today, what is applicable going forward. If you operate on the former knowledge, a lot of money, a lot of process, and a lot of things have been done that becomes difficult to reverse. Okay. Any questions at this stage? So that any questions, any clarification?
Yeah, my question is there any tools to evaluate our position when starting a business? Like, okay, to evaluate the risk.
Well, it's basically being informed. For you to do any evaluation is to be informed, adequately informed. So the tools is to get enough information. If they are experts in that particular field, they basically let everyone know the pro and con. Then the people would be able to take a decision as to what they want to do. These are the consequences. These are the likelihood of this happening, and these are the cost components of it. Okay, so I think that's why people get consultants or people that are knowledgeable in that particular field. Same thing, individuals could, as a result of experience, could be knowledgeable in certain fields. When you are exporting, that's when people retain import and export agents. People retain be able to
well done.
Explain some of these things so that you are able to take a decision in terms of consequences. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so it's not as if there's any particular box that you fill in and it comes out with, I think it's more of getting the necessary parties. Everybody sits down, maybe in the boardroom or sit down in the office, look at all the information. The example I gave in restaurants, in terms of someone slipping on ice, what is the likelihood of it occurring in terms of ice in the driveway? What's the likelihood of it occurring in summer?
Yeah, in summer it's
near.
Yeah.
Unless someone has gone to pour ice block out there.
Oil at the entrance to the restaurant.
Yeah, but in terms of winter, the likelihood of someone slipping on ice is high. So it means that all that you do is to prepare. So when you know these things, you just make the necessary preparations as we looked at the strategies. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, so that's a good question, because knowing all these things would ensure that you avoid costs, you avoid wasted time, because when people have to go and resolve issues or go to court, it's a lot of time that you would have spent doing the business, being focused on resolving a dispute. Same thing, it could avoid, it could cost reputation damage. And for most businesses, reputation, goodwill is a very valuable item. And once you lose it, it becomes difficult to get it back because it's also a thing of trust. Okay? All right, let's go to the next slide. This is all about understanding the various laws. There are the contractual laws, there are the statutory laws. When we talk about import and export, we're talking about sale of goods. Okay? Goods moving from one place, point A to point B. Okay, so there are contractual laws that are applicable in this movement. There are statutory laws that are applicable, and it's important to be familiar with them. What are goods that we're talking about? We're talking about personal goods, items that can be moved from A to B. And that's what import and export is all about. Okay, so when we're talking about sale of goods, we're talking about movable goods. We're not talking about real estate. We're not talking about intellectual property. We're not talking about services. We're talking about movable goods. Okay, so it's important to be able to get familiar with the laws around these movable goods and understanding the contracts that are applicable to these movable goods. Okay, so I'll move to the next slide. One of the area, I'm trying to simplify this so that we can basically understand that personal goods are different from real estate or property or intellectual property, okay? Because they have different laws that are applicable. For example, when we look at goods, which is applicable in this particular instance, we have the laws on how do you transfer title, okay? And what are the effects of transfer, okay? Sometimes we look at these things as, oh, well, the lawyer, but listen, talk is cheap until a lawyer's office, okay? You don't want to go to the lawyer's office every time because you have to pay, okay? So it's good to be familiar with these laws, and I'll try to keep it as simple as possible so that my legal colleagues might not assume that I'm teaching you guys how not to pay lawyers money, okay? That might make me a persona non grata. So make sure this video doesn't circulate too much. All right, so let's look at movable goods, or what we call also personal goods, items that you can move from A. It could be agricultural products, it could be industrial products, it could be military items, it could be liquid, it could be gas, it could be, as long as they are goods, that it could be food products, they can be moved from point A to point B. In the process of doing this, we want to be familiar with how to transfer title, because when you're going from point A to point B, there has to be some degree of transfer of title. In law, what we call this aspect of law is called bailment. Okay, bailment. There's the bailee and the bailor. Okay, but I'm not going to go into technical words so that you don't get confused. But the law of bailment basically makes it clear that ownership and possession could be different. Okay, a person could be in possession, but they are not owners. A person could be owner and not be in possession. So we want to be able to know how this ownership transfers to another person, okay? Because there are legal implications to being owner, and that's what we are going to be looking at. There are rights and obligations with being owner. So when this point of transfer occurs, then we want to be able to know what else are the rights and obligations that transfer with the title of those items. So if you are importing or exporting agricultural products, it leaves seller to buyer. Okay, at what time will the title transfer? That is what this particular aspect of law is. Because when title transfers, one, the risk in that item also transfers. Okay, once seller transfers title in the product to the buyer, then also the risk now transfers. If the buyer gets the title, then they are responsible for any loss. They are responsible for theft. They are responsible for damage. They are responsible for fire or any destruction to the goods. Is that understood?
Yeah.
So that means the point of transfer is very crucial to know who is the one owning a particular item, because whoever owns the item at a particular time, if it is the seller, then the risk is with the seller. If it is the buyer, then the risk transfers to the buyer. Okay. Same thing when title transfers, then it is at that time that buyer cannot reject the goods. Okay. So if you have collected the full title of an item, then it becomes difficult to say you don't want again. Okay. It's like after the title of the pizza transfers to you, you cannot say I don't want the pizza again. You own it already.
Of course.
Okay, so that's always important to know when has the title transferred. It's almost like you buy a vehicle in the dealership. Once you drive it out of the dealership, the full title has transferred to you. Hope I'm trying to simplify this.
Yeah, sure.
If you buy eggs in a grocery, and when you are inside the grocery, there is the eggs break. You can easily go and take another one, right?
Sure.
But when you have paid for the eggs and you're about stepping out, the eggs break. Can you go and take another one?
No way.
Title has transferred. Okay. So you cannot reject an item when the title, you cannot begin to complain after the title has transferred. Same thing, payment. Once a title has transferred, that is the only time that seller can now request for full payment from the buyer. Okay. As long as the seller is having the title, you cannot be requesting because it has not been passed on to the buyer. So you can see how this aspect of who owns an item, which is different from being in possession, really matters in the import and export. Who is the owner at any particular point in time? Same thing, rights of action. What are we talking about that? We're saying once title has transferred, then the owner of the item can protect their property with legal action if anybody challenges them. Okay, you cannot sue with respect to someone else's property. Okay, if you don't own an item, you have no legal rights to litigate with respect to that particular item. Okay, any questions on this? So that I don't want to leave the questions till the end so that we don't forget some of the questions that we want to ask. Any questions?
No question at this point.
All right, so just put it at the back of your mind that it's really important. Anybody in the import and export business should be able to know who owns the item and who is in possession. And that's what the law of bailment is all about, who owns it and who is in possession. The person that owns it, there are certain rights and obligations that is expected of them. Same thing, the person in possession has obligations to carry out. They have certain rights, but when it comes to the items that we just listed out, the person that is in ownership needs to be very careful because they have a lot to lose at that particular moment. Okay, so let's look at also delivery of goods. When goods are being moved from point A to B, there are also legal implications involved in that. Okay, goods could be delivered physically or it could be delivered symbolically in terms of a person hasn't received the physical, but they've been given all the documentation and they have been given the key to where the items are. Okay, so in this particular instance, in import and export, you are exporting from a country and you're having items taken to another country. You want to be clear as to who has the title, who is the owner of the item, who is responsible for the item. For those that are in import and export or insurance, there is what is called cost insurance and freight, CIF, which basically says that the seller pays the expenses until the item is loaded on the ship. Okay, once it's on the ship, then it's on. Then there's also the free on board, FOB, which could be FOB shipping, which means that the buyer assumes responsibility once the items are on the ship, or FOB destination, which sometimes we use when we order things from China or some outside location import. We are saying the item transfers to me when it gets to my office or it gets to my warehouse. Okay, so that's really important, because if you don't have clarity on this, you find at the end of the day, people lose track as to who is responsible. Remember again, the owner is responsible for the theft. If anything happens, damage, because stolen items, whatever happens to it, the owner would be held responsible if the title has been transferred to them. Okay, any questions on this before we move on? All right, so I'm trying to ensure that I simplify some of these things with giving examples so that you can be able to appreciate the responsibility that comes when you become an owner of an item. It's now your responsibility to ensure that it's not stolen, it's not damaged, and it still remains, it's properly protected in terms of warehousing and all that stuff. Okay. All right, let's look at the next slide, which is also another aspect of law, which has, in terms of import and export, there are implications to it. The acceptance or refusal of goods. There are so many reasons, we'll not focus on that here, why a good could be accepted or rejected. Okay, if a simple example, if an item comes at the item you get is not the quality you requested for, definitely you could either accept it or reject it. Okay, so but once a buyer legally accepts, then they are responsible for the item. Okay, what are the ways in which a buyer could legally accept? This is important to know, because the one most people are familiar with is where you call and say, well, I have received the goods. It's almost like when you receive shipment from Amazon or DHL or whatever, once it gets to you, it's not your item until you accept it. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
If you order for phone set from Amazon, if it gets damaged in transit, you are not the owner. They'll have to ship another one to you. Okay, you are not going to be accepting
once you
a
sign
damage.
that you receive it, does that mean
But
that?
once you have acknowledged, that's why when the logistics party come, they get you to sign that you have received it. Okay, but some of these products, based on contracts, they might give you like 10 days or 15 days to be able to ensure that you are okay with the item. But other ways that people are not familiar with is that you could be considered to have legally accepted an item if you begin to deal with it in a way that is inconsistent with the original owner's ownership. Okay? If I order oranges from you and it gets to me and I begin to sell it to other people, by that action, I have accepted what I received from you.
Okay.
Is that understood? If I begin to resell it, then by my actions, it's implied that I've accepted what you sent to me. Okay? Then the third way of accepting is if you keep the goods without notifying the seller that you have rejected it or not, then after a reasonable period of time, it is considered that you own it. Is that understood?
Yeah.
All right. So why I'm emphasizing on this is because sometimes people procrastinate. They receive something and they don't act accordingly. And several period of time passes, then they suddenly are, oh, I received this item, I'm going to challenge the person. No, once you have kept a good for a reasonable period of time, then it is considered that you have accepted it, even if it is not specified in the contract. And the more perishable a good is, the shorter the time.
Yeah, sure.
Okay? So you
out
want
of
to ensure that you act accordingly. If you don't want something, you must immediately communicate with the seller that this is not what you're ordered for. And you are within your rights to return it based on the laws with respect to movable goods. Yeah, you wanted to ask something, sir?
yes, if you receive a good and there's instruction, if the buyer violates the procedure or instruction and the thing got damaged or tamper with sometimes they put quality, the seller put quality stamp or assurance at the back. They say if you tamper with that, it means that they are not legally responsible for the malfunctioning of the equipment. Is that how do we, because the seller is not there with him, and how do you resolve such?
Well, usually it's a matter of being able to determine what happened, what made it defective. So those are questions that will be asked by technical parties. What did you do? If it is electronic equipment, did you use this equipment? What kind of voltage they used and all that? Is the place that you put it in a place that is exposed to weather? All those are questions that they probably would have to clarify. And usually there are departments that clarify this. Same thing when you are even asking for insurance. It's the same thing. Insurance companies ask questions to know what they cover and what they don't cover. Okay. So when instances like what you have mentioned occur, they will probably have the departments that would ask questions to be able to determine whether it's the equipment's fault, the equipment was defective, or the user of the equipment did the wrong things in terms of wrongly used the equipment. And I think it's applicable in so many areas apart from import and export. It's applicable where people buy item in the store and you bring it back. They want to clarify if it's damaged. They want to be able to know what you did with it. Okay. Any other questions? Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes.
All right. Any other questions on this? All right. So we look at in terms of unpaid sellers' rights, and usually this is an issue that occurs in most businesses. The seller has transferred the items, but payment is not forthcoming. So it's always good to know how to protect your rights prior to transferring the items. Or when it does occur, what do you do thereafter? So that's what this is all about, so that people are familiar with how to ensure that they take the right steps. Okay. In terms of just a minute. In terms of unpaid sellers, there are ways for those that are fully in the market. There are ways in which this is ensuring that you have the necessary letters of credit, or you ask for advance payments, or payment to be given to you upon delivery. So you don't want any grammar, or you ask for credit card information so that you can ensure that there's no reluctance about making payments after delivery. usually, sometimes people are not happy with what they ordered for, not because it is different from what they ordered for, but they have just suddenly have a change of mind, or they have something better that has occurred since the time of the order. So the seller wants to ensure that payments, process of payments, and which is very important, how do you get paid? Okay, if you are not sure about getting the payment in advance, you want to ensure that you are securing the item and making it a security. Okay, so that yes, even though you have transferred it, you still have a lien on the property, and if payments are not made, you can enforce your rights by ensuring that those items are sold to get your payments back. Okay, so we'll just be brief on that, because this is usually a problem that most people in any business usually encounter. How do I get my money paid? Many years ago, I had an experience where I shipped some items from Lagos, Nigeria, to Benue State, and installed the equipment, did everything. The shipment was done in the sense that part payment was made, but by the time it was installed and everything, there was a long story that the money will be transferred to me till today, which is almost like 25 years after. I am still waiting for the money to come. Okay?
Then what was the legal action taken?
Well, unfortunately, if you don't have, if something, those are the lessons I learned. If something is important to you, ensure you have a proper documentation.
Okay.
Because the courts, that's what would help if the matter gets into court, have a proper documentation. And another thing you want to ensure is when you are dealing with people that are close to you, friends, family, you want to ensure also that there's a proper documentation. Because the party that I dealt with them was someone close to me, a friend, and I left too many things for granted. And since there wasn't proper documentation, we could not go any further with it than to try to place so much emphasis on the relationship in terms of this is what you promised, but not everybody keeps to their word. Okay, all right, let's move on. I'm sure that experience is what so many of us have had in time past. So in terms of shipping from one country to the other, you don't want to have that kind of, because most times it's difficult to really deal with the person in another country without incurring substantial expenses. Okay, if you are going to deal with unpaid amounts, then you have to retain a lawyer in the other country. And when you know the expenses of retaining a lawyer, most times you are paying dollars to be able to follow up on such. Okay. Any other questions on that? Before we look at contracts for import and export services, this is also important while you are moving one good from point A to point B. There are other services that surround that movement of goods. A lot of parties don't pay attention to this, and they have their goods stuck in the warehouse, and they are told that if you don't pay this amount or pay that amount, you cannot. And you know what happens in import and export. If your goods are stuck, there is a likelihood that you might be incurring demurrage. Okay, so it's always important to avoid any legal issues, to pay attention to the services that surround the import and export. Okay, the services to be provided. And that's why most times a lot of people now deal with FOB destination. As we mentioned before, I don't want to bother about all the customs item. When the items get to my warehouse, then it becomes my property. Okay, most people want to deal with that because they know that there are a lot of services that occur around this. There are a lot of people that sometimes take advantage of the ignorance of the people shipping items. You want to know who is the personnel that will be providing the service, so that you don't have a situation where 3 organizations suddenly say you are going to pay them certain fees. You want to be familiar with the facilities to be made available, the warehousing, the date is going to be available, the payments to be made, the circumstances in which you can terminate your contract, and also, are there any conditions for holdback? I'm not going to pay this money until I'm okay with everything, then I release the final amount. Okay, this for legal issues, this usually is what crops up for most people. Back in Nigeria, this is where you have a problem with when you are dealing with customs agents and the customs and whatever, and suddenly what you have calculated is not what you are being told. Okay, you have anticipated that your total payments will be 2 million, and suddenly you are being told that you are to pay 10 million. It's not only in Nigeria, it occurs in several countries. So it's always absolutely important that you have proper documentation and proper understanding of who is, what are the services going to be made available. I had a personal experience also because I'm a lawyer, but I'm also an entrepreneur. I had also another personal experience shipping items to Canada, and I suddenly realized that there are so many parties that I wanted to claiming that they are involved in this, So I had to look for the best way in resolving this because you don't want your items remaining in the warehouse, because for every day it remains there, you are going to be charged amounts that eventually might make your business not profitable again. Okay. Any questions? All right, so a lot of, I'm just summarizing so that the stuff, you can read the materials at a later stage. Another aspect of import and export is also to understand the negotiation and business cultures. If you do not understand this, the end result is that people end up in court. In a lot of Western countries, the business practice is to start the business, then build a relationship later. While in other countries, it is build a relationship first before we start the business. Okay, so understanding these dynamics helps you to know how to approach, especially when you're going into a partnership with parties globally. Do you want to first build up a relationship of trust, of confidence, before you begin to, because in some countries, if you don't build a relationship of trust and confidence, then you end up getting scammed.
Yes.
Okay. But
That is
in
serious.
Western countries, sometimes you are ready because some things are a lot more transparent in terms of you can easily get information. In some places, when you go to some places, your custom agent tells you that the people said they are going to charge you another extra percentage. Everything is just being communicated to you verbally. If you do not comply, you know that you stand a risk. So understanding all these cultures also helps to avoid certain legal implications. So it's all part of the legal risk management plan to be able to evaluate and decide how do you approach this particular business. If it's something that you cannot handle yourself, then you want to get a proper trustworthy agent who represents in ensuring that some of these areas that you are not familiar with are smoothened out. Okay. All right, the next slide is all about participating in responsible business conduct. This is the summary of this is there are rules of conduct, and the responsibility on the part of everyone to ensure they are playing their part in being transparent, in being responsible, so that they avoid any reputation damage. Okay, if you are dealing with a third party, you want to ensure their reputation is maintained. At the same time, your reputation is maintained. And most of these things might not be what you can document in a contract, but it is just about everybody acting in good faith. Okay? If you are acting in good faith and the person that you are dealing with is acting in bad faith, no matter how much contract you document or write down or put in place, you're obviously not going to come out happy. Okay? So it's always important to know, especially when you're dealing globally, that there are business conducts that people need to adhere to. It doesn't mean that you forget about the legal aspects, because you don't want to act in good faith and someone else is obviously looking for ways. The legal aspect is there because when you get into the court system, it's the legal aspects that will be looked at. Okay? The court system is not, it doesn't deal with emotions. Okay? The court system is adversarial. And when you go into the court system, you must have some document. You don't just go to someone and say, or take someone to court and say, you know, you owe me money. You know when we are discussing, no, that you have to provide evidence. Okay, so while you have all the necessary legal documentation, you also want to ensure that yourself and the other parties are acting in good faith. And that's why globally, sometimes when people have all the legal documentation or are prepared to sign all the legal documentation, they also want to do some research on organizations to know whether they are trustworthy or organizations that would abide with business conduct, responsible business conduct, okay, which we call our RBC. Okay? So, and these principles are important because every corporation wants to maintain their reputation. Their brand is valuable. Okay. You also want to ensure that you are compliant with legal, economic, and environmental and social, put social considerations into what you do. Okay. You also want to ensure that your staff fully understands this, because abiding with this principle opens markets. Okay. Because when you abide with these principles, that your word is bond. Your word is, you stand on your word, then it means that you get more referrals. Okay? These are not strictly legal areas, and I believe when we look at the next item of business law and business ethics, they look like the same thing, but they are not the same thing. Okay? An action could be legal, but is it ethical? Is it moral? Okay, those are the things that every business needs to consider. Not that all the documents are there. Is it ethical? Is it moral? Okay, a business could have ownership or right to eject someone out of a property, but if the person is an elderly person or maybe probably in their 80s, is it ethical for you to eject the person? Because if you do not, it might find it has a way of coming back to bite the organization. There was a time, I think some years back, I think one of the airlines, I will not mention names so that nobody thinks I'm spoiling their business, but they had this incident in US that they were overbooked. And they wanted to they asked passengers, some of them to give up their seats. They offered some amounts, but unfortunately, they could not get the response they wanted. So they now decided to mobilize the police to get passengers out. Okay. Fortunately for them, there was a man a doctor that had, well, he said he had an appointment with a patient in his office, and he could not miss that flight because he had a ticket. It wasn't free of charge. But nobody was listening to him, and the police and the officials of the airline decided to drag him out of the plane. Okay, he ended up having a lot of bruises, but it went viral. It was their right at that particular time to ask people to come down from the plane, because of the procedures they've set in place, but it was not ethical for them to drag off someone in that manner. And because it went viral,
where or which continent did that happen?
It happened in the US, one of the airlines in the US. Because it went viral, the stocks of that airline began to crash. The CEO came out to apologize, but that was not enough. The CEO had to resign. Okay? As a lawyer, we did not hear they went to court on that matter. And when nobody goes to court on such matters, as a lawyer, I know that they have settled.
Yes, of course.
So
Arbitration.
obviously, they must have given the man an offer he could not refuse. An offer that you probably could retire on.
Oh, that's nice.
You know. So when I saw that, I said, maybe I need to go on that airline and ask them to drag me off also.
They've learned their lesson. They won't do that again.
Please drag me off so that we can negotiate and I'll settle. Then I can retire also. You know? So all these things are important to consider. Legal standards, basically the minimum requirements. Business ethics, usually higher standards, which when we do business globally, especially in import and export, we want to ensure that we're not just sticking to legal standards. We are operating the business based on ethical standards. There was another organization that went into a problem in the US. They controlled the peanut business in the entire North America. They were called Peanuts Corporation of America. They discovered in their lab that there was salmonella in their peanuts. Instead of doing a recall or throwing away this peanuts, they decided to push it into the market because of the dollars. Okay, about 9 people died, and about 200 people ended up in a hospital. Because they were not operating by business ethics, they found themselves in that kind of position. What they could have done was to dispose of those items, but they didn't do that. And because of the people that died, there was criminal negligence against the directors, the executives, and I think the CEO, who was in his 60s, I think 65, got 20 years in prison. No, 25 years in prison because of the criminal negligence.
Up to 90 years of age.
His brother, that was also another director, got 15, and another person got 20. But the bottom line is that the other parties, that at least everybody that was injured or died, their family sued the company and the company went bankrupt. There was a class action against the companies. So it's always good to be able to ensure that while we are looking at the business law, we're also looking at business ethics because of the reputational damage that could come as a result of not operating with business ethics. Okay? All right. I'm sure we're familiar with this so that I do not spend, no country is entirely free of corruption, but to deal in import and export, you have to be very conscious about aspect of corruption. There are ways in which what you think is done in secret comes open, and it basically kills the whole business, and people could end up going to jail. Okay? Remember again, ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Yes.
You must be familiar with local laws, international laws. You must ensure that you are abiding with them. It's the same thing. Any product you impend your name or your company name on, you will be held responsible for it. It's the same thing we all do personally. If you are traveling and someone gives you an item, you don't want to pick up these items because you don't want to be held responsible for those items. Corruption goes both ways, the giver and the receiver. So either way, you want to avoid participating in it. It might be easy to cut corners. It might look like the best way to resolve a problem, but there are countries that have so much laws against this, and they enforce these laws, and the penalties are very, very, very strong. Most times, businesses end up being shut down because the penalties are quite high. Okay, not to consider also the reputational damage. You have any questions, sir?
No, I'm just saying that I have to go now.
Okay, I will
I'll
soon
be
be
reading the
rounding up.
rest of the material.
Okay, I'll soon be
Okay,
rounding
Dr.
up.
Peter.
Yeah, so
Thanks
that,
a lot.
yeah. All right, thank you very much. All right, so because of time, I just want to just summarize this. We know about standards also. You don't want to ship things and it gets to the destination and it's rejected in the destination. There are no legal recourse. If you don't go according to standards or regulations, you cannot sue them for returning back your goods to sender. Okay, so it's always important to ensure to avoid all those consequences, to get familiar with the standards in the market that we are shipping items to. We want to know about the accreditation program services, the applicable standards, know the standards authorities there so that we can be familiar. Because when they take actions, most times you'll find you don't have any legal recourse, because at the end of the day, they are going according to the laid down procedures that have been put in place. So it's important that we always look at standards. When a person is requesting for a particular item, ensure that this is properly documented in the contract. If a person wants grade A, then it should be spelled out that it's grade A. Okay? Because if a person says apples, and there are different grades of apples, you want to know which of the grade is acceptable in the country of the country that it's been exported to. Okay, so that it doesn't get there, the buyer is okay with it, but it is not within the standards of that country. And at the end of the day, whether the buyer is okay with it or not, it will be rejected. All right, intellectual property also is another aspect. If any of the items that has been imported or exported has intellectual property rights on it, the laws require that the rights are not being infringed. Okay, as an organization, you don't infringe on the rights of another person, and also the other person doesn't infringe on your intellectual property rights. One of the areas that is important that I think in my master's program I wrote on is talking about in the import and export gray, I think they call it gray goods or so, if I still remember. That was many years ago. Gray goods in terms of, for example, if a company has products, a brand in Europe, they don't want you shipping it to South America. Okay, so there are some restrictions in terms of property rights. So if the whole idea, because sometimes people look at import and export and say, oh, okay, these items are being sold at this amount in Nigeria. If I ship those items to America, then I will sell it in dollars. All those items are particularly identified with regions. So you're transferring what has been shipped by the company to Africa, to another region, might create legal problems, because it's all a matter of looking at the barcodes and identifying what those items are all about. I think in the market, if I still remember, I'll communicate, it's called gray goods or something like that. But I think it's just, I'm sure everyone has an understanding of what I'm talking about, because people that are into import and export, they see opportunities that I can take goods from South Africa and I can take it to Australia. People face certain consequences, and if they don't ask questions or they do not know certain areas of law, they might find themselves, if they are able to ship it out of a country, they might find it gets into another country and it creates a problem for them. Okay? Yeah, even going back to the standards, I remember a particular incident that happened of someone shipped some food items. When it got to Canada, the person was asked to come and ship the item back because they had a lot of insects. I think it was food products. A lot of insects were coming out of the container. So all those things are things that, and they had to take all those things into the lab to test, and they said the person needed to ship the item back. You can imagine if this had to happen, you can imagine the cost components of shipping back what you thought was going to be a profitable business. All right. Right. So I think basically the last item is just to look at areas of disputes. Anytime you have more than one person in a place, there will be a conflict. It might not be immediately. There will be families have conflict, friends have conflict, business partners have conflict. How do you resolve this conflict? Most times people want to jump into litigation, but it does not necessarily have to be so. Whatever ways you can negotiate to resolve it, it is best you do that. Okay? There are costs. Most lawyers will charge per hour, especially when they do not know when the matter is going to be concluded. Any lawyer that charges a flat fee is because they are familiar with the beginning and the end. Within 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, I will finish this matter. But if a matter is going to be unending, lawyers will rather prefer charging per hour. And most times, most lawyers would probably, the least will probably be a minimum of $250 per hour, and it could go to high levels, 1,000 or more. Okay, so when I talk about conflicts in this area, there will be disputes with agents, collection of payments due, breach of contract, intellectual property, secure creditors' rights, enforcement of foreign. There will always be all sorts of disputes. How do you resolve it? If it can be resolved by negotiation, then you are in a best position. You negotiate. If you cannot negotiate on your own, you get parties to negotiate on your behalf. Your lawyer is negotiating with the lawyer of the other party, and it saves you a lot of money. When we talk about alternative dispute resolution, it doesn't take away your right to litigate, but it does help you to resolve a matter that would have been much more costly, time-consuming, and the relationship will be completely broken because in court, a winner must emerge. Okay? When a winner emerges, people don't end up going back to the business. They walk their separate ways. So the best I would advise you is consult a legal professional that will be within that jurisdiction that will be able to advise as to how to resolve either by a negotiation or mediation. We do these things. If we cannot resolve one-on-one, we get a neutral party to come and help us resolve. Okay? The mediator does not decide. The mediator creates the right environment to take a decision. Okay? If the mediator is not able to help, the best alternative or better option is to have an arbitrator. Okay? Instead of going to court, have an arbitrator. Most times, most organizations will put in their contract, if we have a disagreement, the first thing we do is to get an arbitrator and not go to court. Okay? Because the arbitrator is usually someone that is familiar with the industry. And the arbitrator, unlike the mediator, has the ability to decide who is right and who is wrong. Okay? So in that way, when you are using alternative dispute resolution, you are able to control the process, unlike when you get into the court system, it could be there for months or years, most times years. And at the end of the day, you might not get what you want, or at the end of the day, you basically win the case. Okay? Any questions on this before we begin to round up? Any questions?
It's all clear. It's all clear. Thank you.
Yeah. So what I have added to avoid more discussions on this, I have several appendix added to this material. There's a checklist for importing commercial goods. I focus because I'm located in Canada right now, so I focused on Canada, but I'm sure in other jurisdictions also the same thing. There's a checklist for importing commercial goods. There's a checklist for exporting commercial goods. Then there's also Appendix C, which is Canada Export and Import Permits Act, which says what can be imported and exported. The process. Then there's a third appendix, or D appendix, which is just some summary from FASCN on international trade laws, just some brief summary. Then the last appendix is Canada Import Control List and Canada Export Control List. This is important. Maybe I need to share that, so I just quickly show that. We're not going to read anything on that. Let me see whether I can capture that. Okay. All right. So can we see that?
Yes, we can say it.
All right.
Yes.
So that is a checklist for exporting commercial goods from Canada. Okay. So
Yeah,
that
that's
helps
great.
to guide accordingly. Then I think let me see whether that's can we see the other one? This is a checklist for importing commercial goods.
Yes,
Can we see that?
we can say it.
Okay. Then we have the we have the import control list. I'm sure we're all familiar, whoever is listening to this will probably be familiar with this. There are certain things that are within restrictions, import restrictions, and export restrictions. So all this will be listed out in this regulation. Then also there's the export control list for Canada. I want to believe most jurisdictions have the same documentation or similar. Then we have the Canada Export-Import Permits Act, which is the statute that captures everything. Basically, nobody's asking anybody to read from beginning to the end of these laws and everything. As a lawyer, we don't read laws from beginning to the end, okay? I'm sure nobody reads the dictionary from A to Z, right? What's the reason why we go and read the dictionary? Why do we look for the dictionary?
Something we don't
When we see
know.
what we don't understand.
Yes.
All right. So that's the same thing with the law. If there's a particular area of law, if there's an issue you don't understand, then you go check on the relevant law on that issue. Then your analysis would help you decide how does the law support that issue, and you reach a conclusion. So that's the same way. So when I send this, I definitely am not expecting anybody to read it from beginning to the end. But if there's any particular area you need clarification, section 1, section 10, whatever, then it becomes easy to, like the dictionary, you make your reference and you have enough clarity. And when you see the law, that is the conclusion of the argument. Okay? Without knowing the law, people will say, I think, my opinion. But when you see the law, especially an updated law, for example, look at this. I particularly ensure that this is, as you can see, current to June 19, 2024. So the current law is the final word on a particular issue. People could be arguing about the speed limit on the highway, and they could argue for hours, but it's a waste of time. All you need to do is go and check the law, and that's the end of the argument. Okay. Any questions before we round up?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Ken. In fact, we've learned a lot from you this afternoon. So, considering this, our ATESCA project, definitely we are starting small, and we intend to be exporting goods from Africa to Canada, to US or to UK and all that. And starting small entails doing this, what they call group shipping, because you cannot afford probably a big cargo handler, and that definitely you will have to partner with some people or collaborate with some other exporters or importers, in a group shipping process. And what I've seen is that, you see, this entails a lot of risk, because when this lady was teaching us about the exports and imports, that is, I'm talking of Sumbo now, one of the CEOs that taught us about last month or so. So I asked her the same thing concerning this group shipping. So in most of the African markets here, this is what they do. They will have about 4 African, organizations coming together to rent a cargo, and they group ship. But in the process of transferring of risk, if anything goes wrong, let's say particular, okay, we have ICI, we have IBC, we have ACN, we have APC, 4 of them involved in group shipping. Then APC has, a product, that is confiscated at a particular port entry.
Mm-hmm.
And this now affects the whole cargo. And say, okay, look, this cargo is not moving because you have contravened this port entry of, let's say, Italy before it gets to North America and that kind of stuff. So what would be in terms, how will you advise us in terms of transfer of risk? Because you see, the government of that particular country, I'm using, let's say, Italy now, has confiscated that cargo already, and you guys are involved in group shipping, but it's only one particular company that is at fault. So how will you advise us to go about that kind of thing? Because there is no way when we start importing, MMAs, we have to get also involved in this group shipping, small things and all that.
Yeah, so that's a good question, because as we all know, there is no business that does not have, you can't eliminate risk 100%.
Sure.
Is what I spoke about in terms of legal risk management plan. Identify what are the risks, evaluate it, then go ahead and begin to develop strategies. Okay. If we're going to develop strategies, we want to ensure that what belongs to ATESCA is clearly identified. Okay. And
Yes.
also the party that is acting on behalf of ATESCA, whoever is the shipper, is spelled out that they are basically agents. They are not, or let me use the word, they are independent parties. Because if you have everybody's product just mixed up as one, I want to believe they would not do that. When they are shipping items for different parties, they have to identify everybody's party, and there has to be documents to reflect this. But nobody knows. I don't know the operations of some of these organizations, but if everybody's item is gathered together as one item under one name, then the government will be justified if there is any violation to basically confiscate all. But if the items are identified under different names, then it will help in the same way as other shippers. There are so many logistics companies, they ship group for so many people, but they have to identify everybody's items separately. DHL ships, UPS ships, but everybody's item needs to be identified separately. But the challenge now that we do not understand is what are the business operations of the organization that we deal with? Are they being professional, or are they just cashing in to the market by being in the shadows? Are they complying with the necessary regulations or not? No, because when a violation occurs, the normal thing that would happen in the government agency is to get as much information with respect to the organization. How many violations have they had in time past? Are they complying? Are they licensed? All those things are things that would finally have an implication on all the items that are being shipped. But if they are complying with the other aspects and the violation is just one item, then it becomes easy to make a case for the other items that our products are separate from that person's product. Okay, I hope I'm making sense there. But
yeah, sure.
everything will be dependent on the organization that is shipping the item. What is their business operation? Are they also operating within the RBC, as you said, responsible
Business,
misconduct?
yeah, sure.
Okay, so those are the things that would, it's difficult to say yes or no. There are so many, it depends in that factor. And there's so many other parties that would have to determine what kind of, are there any corruption in the process of their shipping? They pay this person to look the other side. All those things that would come out if there is any violation, and that would be what will help in determining what the legal implications are, or as well as the consequences.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Actually, what I also want to say is, for the purpose of the directors of the platform, because you see, if you look, because you also talk about the scope of export. That is, if our scope is Africa, so that is why it's very, very important to look at the legal regulations, the policies governing each country as regards exports.
Yeah.
Not just to say, okay, this what is this something is just coming from Nigeria. It might be the same thing from Ghana. This might be the same thing from Kenya and all that kind of stuff. Things might be different. Point of entry to point of entry. So it's very, very important for us. Once the scope is large, definitely the risk become greater. And because what we are going into, we have our jurisdiction is Africa. It's not only just Nigeria or Ghana. And that is why we are embracing all this, looking at the export potentials of each country, studying them, and also compiling, the policies, laws, and regulations of each country. Because you see, when Sister Sumbo took us on this export and she mentioned something I was not even familiar. She said, okay, you are exporting from Nigeria to Canada. You have to look at the multicultural nature of Canada. That you have to be able to, when it comes to labeling your products, you have to also take into cognizance both the Anglophone and the French Francophone aspect of it. That in case what is required is that that label also must contain that Francophone information, as well as the Anglophone information. I never knew about that before. He said,
those are requirements because at the end of the day, there are laws that emphasize on the labeling because you are communicating with people. There are also laws that emphasizes on you have to have the name of the company, the address of the company, the contact information must be on the label. Same thing also when you have products that have ingredients in them, you have to identify what is in the product. Also, you have to have country of origin. It must be stated there that this is where the item is coming from, because it's also important because there are also different laws that overlap, because there are some countries that Canada might not be, legally speaking, doing business with, and it means that goods will not be able to come in. And also, if an incident happens in a country and there are some restrictions on goods from that country, for example, when there was an explosion, nuclear reactor problem in Japan and somewhere around that area, the fishing products had to be restricted because of the nuclear problem at that particular time. So all those things, there are laws. That's why I didn't want to go into all that. But most of this will also be indicated in the statutes that I've provided. But there are also specific laws that indicate safety requirements, health requirements. If an item is also toxic or explosive, you have to label it as such, and it has to meet certain standards. There are standards that are required in terms of not just labeling it. There are ways in which it needs to be labeled to meet the required requirements.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So if anything is to be done, and that's why sometimes some people bring the products in bulk, then come and label it in a country. It might be more expensive, but if it's been done in a country, then the parties are meeting the specific requirements and to sell someone that is not within that country to do certain things. They will definitely want to cut corners here and there, unless they're very particular about those specific items that has already been researched that it must be done this way or else we are not going to buy.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? So there are so many laws. As I said, usually we look at laws on the basis of identify the issue we are looking at. Then we go and look at, for example, this issue now, it becomes easy to now look at that specifically. What are the labeling requirements under the law? Then that is dealt with. So it becomes like a checklist of, okay, what are the things that we need to look out for? Because at the end of the day, we want to ensure that we are complying with the law with respect to that particular area.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. There are other aspects of even when items come into people are doing business and whatever. As I said, there are items with restrictions. Where it's been exported from, they might not know about all these restrictions. But when it gets to the port of entry, the customs are definitely going to follow up with those aspects. And in Canada, for example, some of these items are usually, it's not as if customs has they have a lot of private warehouses that these goods are sent to. Then the customs go and look at them in those private warehouses.
Okay.
So those the warehouses charge. That's why all those are services that are mentioned in one of the slides that you need to be familiar with. You are dealing with a corporation. If an item needs to be checked, there are all procedures in which, and they are operating within reasonable or responsible business conduct. They have been registered with the customs, and they are not customs, but they basically would be applying. I don't know whether the customs monitors them in terms of camera, but all those things are things that people need to be familiar with, that the fact that it has gotten to the country, if the customs check it and it's not complying, then it has to be returned back to country of origin.
Country of origin. That's true.
Any other questions before?
So, any other question from the platform before we round up? Okay, so on behalf of ATESCA, I would just like to thank our professor of law, Okay, this afternoon for taking us through all these
I think
legal aspects, legal
the
implications.
name is just Ken.
You are the professor.
Don't give me too big a title.
No, you are a professor. As my character is concerned, you are a professor. As long as you are teaching in the university, you are a professor. So that is not this is as far as North America is concerned. So I would just like to thank you, Pastor K, for taking us this afternoon. And I believe definitely everyone on this platform have, we have actually gained a lot. It has opened our eyes to legal implications of imports and business. Because you see, as I always say, life is a continuum of learning. In fact, there was a director that I invited to this platform this afternoon. He said, the company I used to work for, definitely we used to do import and export, so I'm familiar and everything. I said, look, I just laughed. Because you see, life is a continuum, and as Professor Ken told us, definitely they keep on refining laws of countries every day. He showed us even the one of last month, June 2024. So we should take advantage. We've learned a lot, especially in this ATESCA online program in the last 3 months. And I just want to thank on behalf, because this is the last one and we are rounding up today. I want to thank everybody that has participated, and the people from Ghana, we didn't even see any of them, any of the directors from Ghana. And it's quite unfortunate because our first point of imports should be Nigeria and Ghana. And they never participated in any of this ATESCA something. So I don't know how we can actually go to them now when they have not even learned anything throughout the 3 months program. So I just want to thank all the professors, all the directors, and we also have partners also that even join us on this ATESCA training online. And our intention is actually to take it as a semester program because we have a lot of resources now. And all these materials, lectures, we are compiling them into a booklet to be used as a resource material for the semester program. The same thing with all these video recordings. We're going to make a kind of YouTube, brands out of them. We are also compiling a booklet of export potentials of each country from Africa. So we're just gathering a kind of resource materials to be used for our ATESCA online training. So thank you so much, Pastor Ken. Thank you so much, Buki, Adisa Savage, Rosemary, and Silva, and Dr. Peter, and all of you that have participated this afternoon. And I wish you guys a happy and nice weekend. So you'll get the recording as well as the materials from me later this evening.
Thank you for the presentation, and enjoy your weekend.
Same here.
Thank you
Have
so
a great
much.
weekend.
Appreciate.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.